In the spirit of Frank Sinatra, I viewed it my way. In the world of Wireshark, we might have some customization that we might want to do to look at the data the way that we want to see it, the way that makes sense to us. And I don't think there will be any copyright infringement with the Frank Sinatra song based on my personal rendition. Having said that, let's take a look at how you and I can customize our experience with Wireshark. I'd like you to imagine that you and I both work at the same place. So imagine that in your mind. And one day our boss comes up to us and says, you two have been doing such a terrific job. You're both getting promotions. We're like, really? He goes, yes. And you get brand new, bigger offices as well. So we're like, woohoo, that's great. They give us the information on the new offices. And here's my question. What is one of the first things we're going to do as we move our stuff into that office? For many people, if you're like me, it's going to be to customize that office. We might put some pictures on the wall or some plaques up, or maybe move the furniture a little bit to suit us. We're going to customize it. Well, how does that apply to Wireshark? Wireshark comes with some default settings, and very often you and I are going to want to customize those to make it more effective for us, either because we like seeing something a certain way or because it's simply more useful that way. Well, we might want to first start with the columns in the packet list pane. We can sort them, move them, hide them, restore them. Those are all very powerful tools. There's also a lot of functionality in the packet details pane where we can expand or collapse the details of a certain section of a packet that we're looking at. We can also add a brand new column right from the details pane so that shows up in our list, which makes it very, very convenient. One of my favorite features as well is setting up a display filter based on the details. For example, let's say we have a packet that we're looking at the detail of, and we look at TCP and we see the source port is 4096. And we say, you know what, I want to go ahead and filter that out. I don't want to see any packets where the source port is 4096. We can simply select that, add it as a filter right there for a display filter, and it will automatically update the filter for us. It is so cool. We'll also take a look at how we can turn on or off any one of the panes that we want to, including the bytes pane, which, you know, quite a bit is not the primary thing that we're going to be looking at or needing. So if you don't need it, simply hide it so it doesn't take up real estate. And I also want to remind you about the status bar at the very bottom. There's a couple of actually options on the status bar that we can use, and I want to introduce you to those as well. As we go through this demonstration together, I would strongly encourage you to practice along with me. A big part of the watch, learn, conquer methodology is that learning is really enhanced by doing. So I'd strongly encourage you to practice alongside with me. You can either use one of the trace files you've downloaded from the Nugget Lab download area or use your own trace file. We're simply going to be working with manipulating columns and fields, and you can do that with virtually any trace file that you want to. By default, the columns that we're given are the number, referring to the packet number, and it's sorted by default in numerical order. So packet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the capture. Then we have a timestamp, the source, and destination. Now, these addresses are like the highest level address. For example, if it's IPv6, here we have IPv6 addresses. We have IPv4 addresses, and in the case of things like ARP, which doesn't actually have an IP header in it, it's going to go ahead and simply list the MAC addresses involved. We also have a protocol field, the length, and we also have the info. And those are the default columns that we're going to get right out of the box with Wireshark. Let's begin by taking a look at sorting of the columns. Now, by default, these packets all show up in the order that they came in on in Wireshark. So they're based on the packet number by default. But if we want to sort in a different order, for example, based on protocol name instead of the packet number it came in on, we can simply click on protocol, and now they're sorted in ascending order. If we go to the very top, there's ARP at the very top of the list. If we click it again, it's going to sort it in descending order. So if we go to the top of this list, it should be, in this case, it's TLS. If there was a alphabetically later in the alphabet protocol that was here in this capture, that would show up at the top of the list. Another really important feature in Wireshark in general is the right click. So for example, back at number, if we right click on this, it gives us the options for sorting, ascending or descending. So if I want to sort by number again, I can simply click on sort ascending, and that's yet another way to accomplish that same task of sorting based on the column of information that you want to sort on. So let's go back to our very first packet right here. The next task is, well, what if I want to move columns around? Maybe, for example, I want the protocol to be after the length field. How do I do that? You simply click on protocol and drag it over. you drag and drop it over, and that moves it. So if you want to move one column in front of another, simply drag and drop to change the position of those columns. Another really cool feature is to hide a column altogether. So for example, let's say we just want to hide length. We don't want to see that for a moment. We just right click on it and then select hide column, and that column goes away. Now the big trick is, okay, how do you get this column back? Well, there's a couple of ways, but the easiest way to restore that column is just right click on any one of these column headings and select displayed columns. And then you can either click here, packet length, to go ahead and bring it back, or you could say display all, and that would also restore it and any other columns that were currently in hiding. So we've addressed regarding columns, sorting, moving, hiding, and restoring. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to pause right now and practice those techniques on your own. When you're done, go ahead and click resume, and we'll jump into packet details. To look at the details of an individual packet, we simply highlight it here from the packet list, and let's scroll down and let's go ahead and grab an HTTP packet right here. So lots of good content. In fact, I'm going to move this up just a little bit. Scroll that up to the top. And that will give us more real estate in this packet detail area. Now, what I really find enjoyable about a protocol analyzer is that it tells a story about this information that we're looking at. For example, someone sent a HTTP request, very likely a user who is running a browser that was using this application layer protocol. That HTTP got wrapped up into a layer 4 protocol called TCP. So with all the header information, that TCP portion along with the payload could be called a segment of data. Then that information, that TCP information, got re-encapsulated inside of IP at layer 3. The source address, the destination address, in fact, all these details you see right here were all added as part of that encapsulation process. And then the IP packet got encapsulated once again into a frame of data. And that, in this case, it's on Ethernet, and it added the source and destination MAC addresses for this packet. It also indicated the next layer protocol. In this case, hexadecimal 800 says this is for IP version 4 specifically. So for TCP, we could call this a segment of data. Once we had the IP header, we could call that a packet. Once we add the layer 2 information, that's often referred to as a frame. And then Wireshark adds this additional information, and it calls it frame. I mean, it's written right there as frame, but it's not referring to the Ethernet or layer 2 header information. It's simply referring to like an overview of this packet that we're looking at. It has information, for example, when it arrived, the length. Is this frame currently marked? Meaning, did we mark it as a frame of significance inside of Wireshark? The Reader's Digest version of what's contained. So it's saying it's HTTP wrapped up in TCP, wrapped up in IP, wrapped up in Ethernet. Fantastic. It's also specifying why it's colored the way it is. But as far as why the coloring rule is the way it is regarding this packet, the information's right there in this frame section. We can think of this frame section in Wireshark as the resume regarding the information it collected in this packet. Another really cool feature is that if you want to open up a brand new pop-up window just for this packet, in 37 in this case, we can just double click on it and that opens up a separate window. And that's pretty handy too. So we can work in the main details pane. That's okay for now. Another thing that you might have already noticed is that to see the details, we simply click on the plus or minus symbol to expand and collapse these sections appropriately. However, we could right click and check this out. So for example, let's go ahead and select the Ethernet layer 2 header and right click, and let's go ahead and say expand subtrees. That's going to expand everything inside of the Ethernet header and that subsection. If I didn't say expand the entire subtree, these right here would not have been expanded for me. So I'd have to click on the plus and click on the plus again. And just as easy as those opened up, we can right click and we can go ahead and say collapse all, and that'll collapse them as well. So if we want to look at the IP header, we'll simply expand that. If we want to expand all of it, we could have either right-clicked and said expand subtrees. Now let me show you something that's going to blow your mind. There's several different ways of doing lots of stuff inside Wireshark, and I'm always for the most efficient, most direct way of doing it. Let's say we wanted to add a new column in our packet list view up here. One way of doing that is we could select data from the detail view, right-click, and simply say, I want to add this as its own column inside the packet list view. So let's go down to the HTTP section right here. And here it says host. Now I just grabbed packet 37, but most HTTP are going to have some server or host field in them. Let's right click on this host field and say, I want to go ahead and I want to apply this as a column. After we launch this, we're going to have a new column that's going to be wedged in that's going to specify host because we said we want that as a new column. So let's do it. So we'll click on apply as column, and there we have host right there. So if we scroll through these, so you'll notice it added the host name where there was a host name, and where there wasn't a host name involved, it simply left it blank. If we want to space out our columns, we can use this trick right here to resize all columns to go ahead and make sure we can see everything. For example, if we wanted to know, we want a separate column just to indicate that it's TCP, you could simply take TCP, right click, say add as column, and then it's going to say yes for all the protocols that are TCP, and for the ones that aren't, they would be left blank. If we wanted to be more granular, for example, let's open up a TCP session, and let's say we want a separate column just for destination port for whatever reason. We could right click on destination port, click on apply as column, and poof, it's there. So we have a separate column just for destination port. If we wanted a separate column just for flags inside of TCP headers, we could right click on that guy, select apply as column, and there we have our flags. And you notice here DNS doesn't have any TCP flags, so it doesn't have anything listed there. But the concept is you can add these columns dynamically with simply right clicking on the areas that you want and say apply as a column. So how do we get rid of these columns if we don't want them? Really simple. Simply right click and we can either hide them or we can say I want to remove them. And we can simply do that for each of the ones that we don't want. We've identified that the frame, in quotes, section of the details pane is really just an overview or resume, sort of, for that packet that we're currently looking at. If we want to see the individual details, we identified how we can expand or collapse any of those sections, the layer 2, the layer 3, the layer 4, or the application layer. We can expand or collapse those either using a right click and the option, or we can select on the plus or minus symbol to do the same thing. We could also open up each packet as a brand new window if we wanted to. We identified that we could create a new column on the fly by right-clicking on some detail in the details pane and then saying add as a new column, and it simply applies it for us. Adding the columns was really easy, and adding a display filter based on information that we're looking at in the details pane is also just as easy. Check this out. Let's say we want to remove some information from the screen just temporarily by setting up a display filter. One really easy way of doing that is by using the details pane. For example, let's go ahead and say this packet right here, it's IPv6. Let's say that's not of interest to us. So we could right here select IPv6, right click on it and say I want to apply this as a filter, and I want to specify that this is going to be not selected. Once we click this, check this out. This display filter says, okay, no IPv6 will be displayed. That's what that display filter says. So everything except for IPv6 is showing up. And this is one of the easiest ways to create filters, by simply right-clicking and saying, I don't want that. Now let's add to that display filter. Let's also say that we want to get rid of all these SSDP packets. And let's take a look at the user datagram protocol and the source port of 1900 for SSDP. Let's right-click that and say, you know what? I want to apply this as a filter, but I want it to be in addition to my current display filter. So I'm going to say and not selected. So currently it's no IPv6 right here, and we're about to add the fact that we don't want SSDP as well. So we'll say and not selected. And there we have it. So basically this filter says is no IPv6 and no UDP source port equals 1900. Now we could have manually written that filter out, and we'll have a whole nugget on filters coming up. However, I think you can see right off the bat that right-clicking and selecting is a very quick way to set up your filters. What I'd love to do is leave that filter in place just for a moment and talk about two additional things, and that's the bytes pane down here and also the status bar right here at the bottom. I've discovered that the bytes pane is really interesting to look at. Sometimes it's helpful, but most of the time it's not the first place I'm going to look. If we want to remove this pane to give us more visual real estate for everything else, The way you get rid of it is simply by going up to View and saying, I do not want to see the packet bytes pane, and that toggles it off. And to get it back, we go to View and simply add it back. But if you don't need it and you want more real estate, which is normally the case, we can go ahead and turn it off and then turn it back on if you need it, just like that. Now, regarding the status bar right here at the very bottom, let's take a look at that for a moment. Now, right now I'm selecting this packet, and as a result, it's showing me the capture file that I'm working with, which is the packet capture NG for next generation. It's showing me the size. It's 824 kilobytes. In that capture, it has 1,170 packets. Currently being displayed is 1,147. Why the difference between these two numbers? And that's because this display filter right here, it's simply filtering out IPv6, and it's also filtering out any packets with the source port UDP of port 1900. And as a result, that's the missing packets. They're not really missing. They're just hidden from the current display. It also has a field for mark. Now, at the moment, we don't have any marked packets, but let's change that. Let's go up to this DNS request for CBT nuggets. And let's say we want to note that. We want to mark this packet so we can go back to it later. To mark a packet, you simply right-click and you say, I want to mark the packet. And poof, it's marked, and check this out. Now we have a little marked 1, meaning there's one packet that's marked. If we wanted to go ahead and mark another packet, we simply right-click on it and say mark it, and now it goes to 2. If you want to unmark it, you right-click again, select mark packet again, and it removes the mark. In the status bar, there's also information about what profile we currently happen to be running, and we're running the default profile. We'll have another nugget on how we can customize that as well. But these are handy pieces of information to have right here in the status bar. And if we change it, for example, if we go to the details pane, for example, I've highlighted the Ethernet header in this ARP packet, and that is packet 25 right here. So we're looking at the detail here for packet number 25. And because I highlighted the Ethernet portion, it's saying, okay, that Ethernet portion is 14 bytes in length. If I go down to the actual address resolution protocol, the actual request, that part is 28 bytes. And if I was interested in seeing how long the sender MAC address was, I could click on that, and that shows me that it's 6 bytes in length. And I think the math works out on that. So 2 hexadecimal characters represents a byte. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bytes, which would be perfect. And a MAC address is 48 bits. And it's handy when the math works out. Now, what isn't obvious to many people on the status bar down here at the bottom is that we have this button right here, which has the expert info for us regarding this packet capture that we're looking at. So if we click on that, it has information regarding warnings, notes, chats, details, and any packet comments. And have no fear, we'll be diving in deeper into expert info as we continue along. So for example, if we went back to warnings and said, okay, what's this all about? X.509 sounds very certificate-like. So if we expand that, it'll tell us the 3 packets where those warnings are coming up. And check this out. I'm going to move this over just a little bit. If we click on the packet here, it takes us to that packet. So that's packet 313. Here's packet 802. There's packet 950. And that would give us an opportunity to dive in deeper to see what that warning is all about. So if we close that, that's a really handy feature. The other handy item is adding comments to this capture file. And that's done with this icon right here. So if we want to add capture comments, we can. And if you're saving your file format as that packet capture NG, which is the default on the current version of Wireshark, that allows us to save the notes, the comments, as part of that capture file. In this video, we've taken a look at how to customize the columns and diving into the details of the packets, leverage that space as well, including creating custom filters or creating brand new columns based on the information in those details. Now, I've got a question for you, and that's simply this. When is the best time to practice these exact techniques and get really comfortable with Wireshark? A, in the middle of a crisis when the network's down and people are on your back, or B, right now? I would strongly encourage you, if you have a computer in front of you and Wireshark is available, take a few moments right now and practice these customization techniques. In addition to increasing your comfort level in working with this amazing tool called Wireshark, you're also building your skills that are applicable and can be applied directly into a production network. Once you're done practicing the techniques that we've covered in this video, you're ready to move forward. I've had a blast. I'm so glad you joined me. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.